My name is Lacey Leone McLaughlin. This is Unfolding Leadership, and it's my pleasure to introduce John Vause. John's a multi-award-winning journalist for CNN International, currently anchoring CNN Newsroom on CNNI. For the past 25 years, he has traveled the world, reporting from more than 30 countries on some of the biggest stories, including earthquakes, typhoons, assassination, the Arab Spring, the death of Kim Jung, the U.S. government shutdown, the 2006 and 2014 Israel-Hezbollah Wars, the Beijing Olympics, the U.S. invasion of Iraq, 9/11, the fall of the Taliban, and many, many more. With the extreme experience on a wide breadth of international leadership, John and I could talk for hours. Don't worry, we won't. Let's start this conversation and the season finale by hearing more from John. John, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. I'm really excited that you're here. As we jump in, talk to me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I've been at CNN for more than 20 years now, and I've both been a correspondent based in Jerusalem and Beijing. I've been a roving correspondent as well, and senior international correspondent. And then about 12 years ago, I got a chance to move back to the United States and take up a position on the anchor desk. And that is where I have been. I always get out every now and then to do reporting as well, which is good. But yeah, my primary role now is, I was thinking about this the other day, for 12 years, I've been the breakfast anchor to CNN International in Europe and Britain, which is an incredibly long period of time when you think about it. So yeah, so that's been my main job. It's actually focusing on that European breakfast morning slot for more than a decade now.
Yeah, which is no small feat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is that there has been incredible change in other networks and other anchors and other formats, and programs have come and gone, anchors have come and gone. Piers Morgan keeps coming back, but I'm still here, which is kind of remarkable. And so do my colleagues at CNNI. We're an incredibly stable bunch of people.
Yeah,
at work.
Great. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, you talked about change, and I know that there's been a lot of consistency in your team and the work that you do, but the change in the world has been pretty large the last few years and even before that. So what's top of mind for you in terms of what you're seeing in the world?
Oh, God. Fear, uncertainty. For me, what I think ever since 9/11, it just felt like we got onto this period of just constant change, turmoil, chaos, new world order, new way of doing things. Suddenly you got to take our shoes off on the plane, we take our belts off, we get used to that. Then something else happens, and we get used to that. And this turmoil we keep normalizing turmoil all the time, and it just becomes. And so now this chaos and this craziness, it's normal. We just kind of deal with it, which is an incredible testimony to society and people as a whole, but it's also something which we shouldn't have to do. It's kind of sad in a way.
So you've had a chance in your career, and I've had an opportunity to watch some of these interviews, but you've talked to some pretty amazing leaders, and both formal and informal, the leaders that were put there in place for a reason, or the individuals or the humans that stepped up in a moment, right? So leaders across the board. And when you think about normalizing chaos and fear and uncertainty, what is the characteristic that you see from those leaders that really rise to the top in those moments where some sort of leadership is needed?
Empathy.
So say more. What do you mean?
The ability to have regard for other people, to do what you do for them, to care about that person even though you don't know them. You care about their plight. You care about their kids. You care about their lives. You have a genuine investment in how these people's lives play out. And, if you look at from my point of view anyway, some of the best leaders that I've ever seen are the ones who genuinely have empathy for those around them.
You've seen leaders in their worst. You've seen them in their best. And they're in some pretty extreme situations sometimes, or sort of those situations that the world is coming at them fast. How do you think that empathy translates to the corporate environment?
That's interesting, because I was thinking about this, and I'll reframe it in a different way, in the sense that I was thinking about my best boss and my worst boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone gets a worst boss, and everyone obviously gets best bosses throughout their career. And the trick is to recognize, who they are. And my best boss, in terms of empathy and leadership and that kind of stuff, was a woman by the name of Rena Golden. And she was amazing. She was hard as nails, an absolute, ball breaker at times. And she would she'd make your life a misery. If you screwed up, you knew it. And that was great, because she knew what she was doing. She had a vision. She had a direction. She had a plan. May not be the best plan, may not be the best vision, may not be the best direction, but she had it. Mm-hmm. And we were doing it. And it was like, it's like what Ted Turner says, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Either you're part of it or take up a leadership role if you have to. But if you're not going to do either of those, then you're not on the team. Mm-hmm. And that was Rena's kind of motto, but she would always let you know exactly where you stood. She would mentor, she would guide, she would encourage, she would also berate and kick your ass when you needed it. And to me, that was something I never had in a boss. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately because Rena passed away a few years ago, sadly. And I just thought that her role, her example, was such a good one to follow. Because I've worked for bosses who they're chummy and they're nice and they're to your face and everything's great. You got no idea what's happening behind your back.
It's interesting because I hear you say expectations and transparency. And then I go back to your very first statement when we got on together, which was, talk to me about what's going on in the world. And you're saying, it's a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty. And I make the correlation with the bosses that maybe aren't laying out those expectations, are holding people accountable and are transparent. It's about fear and uncertainty.
One thing about working at CNN that I can honestly say is that we have an army of workers who, once they get their orders and are told what to do, off they go. They will do it. They will. I work with people who will march over broken glass on hot coals to do what they are told to do. But they have to be told what to do. And that means someone at the top has to know what they're doing. And so unless you have that direction and that leadership, that's when you get this uncertainty. That's when there's a vacuum. No one likes a vacuum. Everyone fills the vacuum with all the horrible things that they think are happening, which aren't. As you know, I do that. But yeah, so you've got to have that kind of that transparency and that direction too. And without it, it becomes quite scary for everybody.
So if you don't mind me saying, you just got back from an assignment where?
Yeah, I was in Ukraine for almost a month. And that was, it was weird because we were in Lviv, which, for the most part is this bubble. We had one morning when there were 5 cruise missiles which struck around our hotel, around the city, to be honest. And that was when the war came fairly close. There were other times when there were, shelling and stuff on, way outside the city, but within sort of the city area. But nothing really that close. So we had one scary morning. And that was it. Well, you look around and you look at what's happening not far away, a couple hundred kilometers away in Kyiv, and it's utter devastation. And there are horrendous things happening to people at the hands of the Russian soldiers. And it's like close, but you're a world away from it in some respects, but you're also right up next to it. Mm-hmm. So you live in this bubble. So there's that kind of guilt about, I've got this gilded cage, if you like. My life is great. The air raid sirens go off. Oh, damn, we can't get room service right now. Well, poor as hell. That was kind of about it in terms of hardships. But you're constantly reminded that what these people are going through and what, the fact that this war could come to you at any moment. And that's what those people in Ukraine, in the western part of the country anyway, are dealing with. While the East is, undergoing this whole military offensive at the hands of Vladimir Putin for absolutely no bloody good reason at all.
Yeah. So when you came back, we talked a little bit about some of the leadership that you had seen and the president and the locals and the people in general. And I would love to just hear your riff and reflect on that a bit.
Well, I mean, what a difference between Putin and Zelensky. And what a difference this war has made. Before the war, Putin was, he was the terrified former KGB guy, the guy who was playing chess when we were all playing checkers or Hungry Hippo or something. He was this master of...
I like the Hungry Hippo reference. That's pretty good.
Thank you. And Zelensky, well, he was the moron. He was the comic actor who, his poll ratings were terrible. The country was divided, all this kind of stuff. And then the war has ripped off and exposed what how those perceptions were incredibly wrong. Zelensky has proved to be this incredibly inspirational, strong-willed leader, even in the weeks leading up to the war. There's 180,000 troops going down on the border of the country. He knows everything that's going on. And they made a decision not to share all of the information with people in Ukraine to avoid panic, because so they told them there's 180,000 Russian troops coming. Everyone's going to run for the exits. But he kept all that within himself and his obviously his circle. But he went on television every night saying there is nothing to fear. Everything's going to be fine. Reassured the nation night after night after night. Said, "Come, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this." And then when the Russians invaded, he did not leave. When the Americans say, "Let's evacuate to Lviv," he said, "I don't need a ride. I need ammunition." Which was great. He got back into his office as soon as he possibly could. He kept almost taunting Putin with these broadcasts while Putin was sort of isolated with that bowling alley of a desk that he had, with Putin down one end and everyone else like Sergei Lavrov down the other. Whereas Zelensky's out there actually, with the troops. He's wearing the fatigues. He's actually looking as if he is a guy in charge, an inspirational leader who's done everything right, in terms of leading his country and keeping it together through what has to be like the most incredibly god-awful, challenging time he's ever seen. Any leader would ever see something like this, being invaded by a foreign power, let alone Russia.
Yeah. So if you were to sum up 3 characteristics that you observed, what would those be?
Selflessness, courage, determination. The other thing to which I was thinking is that the bosses that I've always liked the most are the ones who admit that they don't really know what they're doing. We're going to muddle through this together, or I ain't got a clue. Well, let's work it out. As opposed to the boss who's the voice of God and pretends that they know it all. Everything's just do as I say. And so the bosses who come to you and say, "Hey, we've got a problem. We're going to try and fix this. I don't know what we're going to do, but help me out, or what you got any suggestions or whatever." And at times I've kind of shied away from that, because my role at CNN sort of is more like a constitutional monarchy. I kind of have responsibility, but I don't have any authority. I front the news show, and I can tweak the scripts, and I have some input and some editorial control. But overall, I'm just kind of I'm a figurehead in a way. I'm a guiding constitutional monarchy. So my sort of leadership role sort of varies. When I need to take charge, I will. But when I don't have to, there are other people there who I think do a much better job than I do on sort of the day-to-day running of the place. So getting those 2 hours to air each night.
Yeah. So do you think you're diminishing your role? Because we've had a lot of conversations about leadership and how you show up. So that doesn't sound consistent.
I think I think I'm just being sort of realistic about where I am in the scheme of things. I mean, look, if I wanted, I think, look, if I wanted to exercise, whatever authority I have, if I wanted to go to the mattresses, I could.
Yeah, but hold on. Are you confusing leadership and authority?
Well, I think the two go hand in hand.
Okay, so define leadership for me. Well,
leadership is I hate defining words with the really obvious ones. Okay. For me, the leadership is the person who steps up and is the one who sets the direction, be it the North Star, be it in my case, decides on how the show will be put together, decides on the editorial content, that kind of stuff. Authority is the person is what you have to make that happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? It's like having diplomacy without an army.
Yeah.
Diplomacy without a military is just talk.
Yeah. So if I was to say leadership is not always positional, would you agree with that or not?
I think you can take a leadership position within a certain area, yeah, without a doubt. But that's not being. There's a difference between being a leader and the leader.
Yeah, or a leader and the boss. There's a difference.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
Right. Okay.
I mean, leadership is taking ownership in many ways.
Yeah, which you take.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, maybe too much.
No. I mean, I'm just curious because it's fascinating, because when we think about the impact that you have on the people you work with, the team in general, if it's not working well, it's not working well. So it's just, fascinating to me to hear you say, yeah, I take a sort of second seat, but I think there's an opportunity for you, and you have been leading, maybe without being the boss, which you're not the boss, but definitely leading, driving, and helping put the content out in the world in a very real way.
What I have learned from a very helpful advisor and coach is that there are ways of doing things that can either get you what you want or just make you feel good because you're mad. Mm-hmm. So you can vent and carry on, which is kind of what I would often do in the past. And while I was 100% right, of course, in my own mind, it did not produce the results that I needed.
Interesting.
And so what this person helped me with was essentially finding the right words, the right tone, the right, just seeing that sweet spot of not being bullshitty, not letting people off the hook, but also not destroying them as well. Not going after them because they made a mistake, because they screwed up. Because, those mistakes that happen, they don't own them. I do. The vast majority of people don't turn up to work thinking they're going to do a bad day's work. Most people turn up thinking that they're going to work pretty hard and do a good job. Now, whether or not they do that is, you can have that debate. But my thing was always to try and take that goodwill at the beginning of the day and try and make sure that it translates into good product at the end of the day.
Yeah. I love that. So first of all, I want to say that advisor sounds very, very wise.
She's awesome.
And second, my question to you is, you sit back and reflect on the change of behavior, your willingness to have those conversations, reach out. What's your biggest learning?
I think, one thing, if you looked at how I was before, it could probably be best summed up as in damn the torpedoes. Folks, we're going to do it this way. We're off. And now maybe it's more like, let's just be a little flexible here. Let's just, engage a little more. Maybe I'm not always 100% right. It is possible.
When you think about your lessons learned in terms of your own growth and journey, you talked about this boss that was amazing for you. What are some of the bumps and bruises that you felt along the way? Give me a story.
Oh, God. I was thinking about this. My thing is, what I'd learned is that the whole, and it wasn't actually about me. This is when I was a reporter in Australia. And we were covering a horrible shooting in Port Arthur in Tasmania. And I was one of the first reporters on scene. We helicoptered down from Melbourne to Hobart in Tasmania. And 35 people had been shot dead. 40 people had been wounded. And it was horrific. It was a really, really tough story to cover. And even though I was one of the first reporters on the scene, and it was sort of in our patch as part of the Melbourne newsroom, the network flew in the big network reporter who, was the network reporter. And we were all staying in this Fleabag hotel because it could accommodate our entire news team. We had 30, 40 people or something. And we're staying in this horrible, horrible hotel with Hessian bags on the wall and fleas in the carpet. But we're all together and we're all working together. Not the network reporter. He went and stayed at the most expensive hotel in town because he could get 2 rooms, one for him and one for his cameraman. I was only, in my 20s at this time. I was fairly young. And I used to think this guy was awesome. Mm-hmm. I used to look at his stuff on air and I'd be, wow, you're amazing. I want to be like you. And then I saw him in action. I thought, you're a jerk. I don't want to be anything like you. And so, that was something that I took from him, is that, you can be the best at what you do, but that doesn't make you, a good leader. And so I've always tried to take the point of view that I'm always part of a team. I always carry the tripod, which is a big thing for cameramen. I always carry gear. I always joke, three quarters of a reporter is porter. Everyone lugs the gear together, and I've always been like, I will work towards the very end and pack up the gear, even though I've finished my live shots, even though I've done my script, I couldn't get to the hotel. But no, we're going to pack up the gear together because we are a team and we're all in this. We're going to do this together. I think that has always served me well. And I know you wanted kind of more of a different story than that one. But that has been my big sort of thing that I have always done, even when I wasn't being a particularly good leader in other areas, I've always tried to be a team player, even though I was the one who was meant to be playing, the leadership roles.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to where I was pushing you a bit, and you're sort of minimizing your role from a leadership perspective.
Right.
Sounds like leadership to me, John.
Well, it is, but I guess in the sense that, I can lead and I can offer my opinions, I can offer my direction, my guidance, and all the rest of it, and I can have my influence on the way things happen. But my ultimate authority, the ultimate authority rests with somebody else.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the important thing of being a leader as well, I think, is knowing that there is somebody who makes that final decision.
Yeah. And
once that decision is made, as a senior person on the team, not necessarily, the overall boss or the leader, but once that decision is made, you have to follow that. And again, lead, follow, get out of the way.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. And I think the impact and role of team in that is huge, especially for what you do. I mean, I would assume if you're not lead, following, or getting out of the way when you're on location, that can be kind of dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing quite like bonding with a group of people who you spend 6 months traveling through Iraq. I'll never forget my first big overseas assignment was Tora Bora, when they were dropping daisy cutters to flush out, Osama bin Laden, who was hiding in the days. There is nothing like bonding with your colleagues when you are sleeping 19 to a mud hut on a mud floor in a sleeping bag when it's 25 degrees outside. And it's just a lunar landscape up in these mountains. And you get to know people really well in those circumstances.
Talk to me about some of your learnings around team then. So you have been in positions with teams of people who you're protecting, they're protecting, your success, their success, very closely tied together. I know that's not the stakes and the risk associated with your average corporate team, but what have you learned about team?
One thing that I think is really, really important, that if you are sort of, the leader within a team, is that you have to know, obviously, the strengths and weaknesses of the people around you. And then you have to make sure that you make the most of those strengths and try and minimize the weaknesses, and then, work together. And when you get that clicking, it's great. And I feel really lucky to have been part of that and to, play a very small role in doing nothing more than allowing others to see this person's ability. And that's been great.
Yeah. So if I take and summarize what I think I just heard you say, it is teams, when they work well, it's about making sure the team kind of comes together as a puzzle and we all complement each other.
Yeah.
It's giving them the opportunity, each member of the team, the opportunity to shine and do what they do best. And then also just in general, the behaviors associated with working well with one another. And I'm guessing that's, again, the transparency and the authenticity and the vulnerability and all those things that we've already kind of mentioned a bit.
And again, I get back to Rena Golden, who was my best boss ever. Rena Golden said to me once, John, you're being obnoxious right now. And she said, you've done blah, 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 blah. And I'm telling you that, you're pissing people off because you're kind of being an obnoxious jerk. What?
Never.
Me? No. And I couldn't believe it. I said, what do you mean? And she said, listen, blah, 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 blah. And she gave me a couple of hard examples. And she said, look, just go away, think about it. We'll circle back next week and we'll talk about it. But I want you to think about, your attitude and interactions with people around you, because you're being a dick, or worse that effect, right? And, that was really hard to take, but I was kind of being an obnoxious dick, and I did need to be brought in line. I'm glad someone did it, because otherwise I probably would have been fired at some point.
Yeah. So what did you do differently?
I stopped being an obnoxious dick. I just became much more aware of, my sort of brash humor, which sometimes people, I don't know how, can sometimes find offensive or take the wrong way or find it, it's the difference between our cultures. I'm Australian, and so we can be a bit harsh sometimes and a bit in your face. So I put it down to that.
Okay.
But Paul Cutler was this guy who was my boss at TVNZ in New Zealand, in Auckland, and who also was my boss later on at CNN as well. But I remember once it was, so the 6 p.m. show would go to air, and we'd all the reporters would gather around in Cutler's office, and we'd all watch the news with a beer. Oh. Anyway, and I had a lead story that night. It was a funeral for the police officers who were in this chopper crash. It collided with another plane over the freeway. It was a huge story for New Zealand because nothing ever happens. And so they had this funeral for the pilot. And I had written what I thought was the best script you could ever possibly imagine. Nothing was going to beat this script. It was poetry. It was Yeats meets Hemingway. There was this amazing stuff. Anyway, so it comes to the end of the story, and there's sort of silence. And Cutler looks at me and says, "What was that overwritten piece of crap that went to my air?" He said, "That was..." He was a bit harsh. But again, he was right. And, and he did it in a way, too, that was like ripping off a Band-Aid. It was publicly done. It was kind of a humiliating thing, but it was humiliating, but it wasn't a humiliation in a way. And it was good because it was in front of my colleagues who were all thinking the same thing, probably, that I was this young, because I did like 22 at the time or something. I barely started in television. And so here's this young moron who thinks that he can, write this sort of, flowing poetry or something or prose. And it had to be done. And it got everything done out in the way, air cleared, and I learned from it.
Yeah.
And it was a short, sharp, harsh lesson, but it was a very, 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 very valuable one.
Yeah.
I say.
It almost sounds like it was a lesson in it's not always just about you.
Oh God, I mean, that's the thing. There's the other thing I think about leadership is that being the best at what you do can actually be kind of a hindrance at times. And I've often said it's sometimes there's a line out of Broadcast News, the movie with Holly Hunter. Holly Hunter is this character who's the producer who knows everything, and she's really, really smart. And the news director says to her, "It must be great being the smartest person in the room." And she says, "No, Ed, it's terrible." And I sometimes felt like that, because I feel like I'm the guy who knows not everything, but I got the answers. I know this, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you just have to shut up sometimes.
Yeah, because it
doesn't do you any good to be the smart ass in the room.
Yeah. And in that moment, it was about the officers who passed away, not about your beautifully written words. And you hearing that and knowing that has probably made your work better for years to come.
It really did. It made me realize, just from an editorial or from a writing point of view, the adjectives are kind of meaningless unless you unless you sort of have a much more intimate knowledge of who you're writing a story about. And their lives and their deeds and their words are far more important than mine. Yeah. So that was kind of things I learned from that.
Well, I've got to say, and I think I've told you this before, I think there has been, some real tragedies recently that you've reported on, and how you have brought those to the screen has been graceful, respectful, and sensitive in a way that has not been consistent with everybody that I've seen. So clearly those lessons have shown through and show up in your work, because I think you did a really nice job recently with the shooting and some other things that are happening, not making it about you at all. It was really quite lovely to watch. Thank you. I mean, the shootings in this country have been pretty tough because Sandy Hook was, I went to Sandy Hook. I've been doing school shootings in this country since Columbine. And Uvalde is just the latest one where, and it just is so senseless, and I don't get it. And one thing which I've kind of done recently is that if we start having people on for debates over gun laws and gun reforms, I just say up front, I don't like guns. I don't think you need a gun. I definitely think you don't need a semi-automatic weapon, and I really don't think an 18-year-old should have a semi-automatic weapon. That's me. Okay, that's my point of view. Let's talk. Yeah. At least, I'm not going to lie about being unbiased, not having a position. I think guns suck. Yeah. We're covering mass shootings since Port Arthur, 1996. Yeah. Gonna say it. Another really great example of leadership. Really? Yeah. I mean, being brave to say what you believe. And then the other thing that I was taking notes on when you were talking is also being willing and able to listen and hear, right? You've got some really good examples of you sitting back and saying, hey, if you're going to give me feedback, I'm going to listen and I'm going to hear because it matters to me.
I think that's at times it's been the only thing that saved me from being fired.
So it's insight and awareness, not necessarily the actions or behaviors that come from it.
It was basically, instinct and survival skills.
Okay, good. So as we wrap up, a couple of things I want to have you sort of riff on a bit.
Okay.
Your life experience in general, whether you're in the field reporting, whether you're talking to amazing leaders, whether you are a member of a team and leading in some capacity within your organization. If I'm a 20-something and I'm thinking about leadership and how I want to show up, what should I be thinking about?
Within a news organization?
Nope. In life in general.
Oh, life in general. Show up.
What is that? Say more.
Be the person who says yes. Or, if you want to do it, do it. I know that sounds like cliche and it's easy and much easier said than done. But, there is a whole world out there of opportunity for people who turn up. Mm. And if you take that sort of decision that you are going to be, I don't know, you want to do X, you want to be, I don't know, you want to take a certain career path, and you're not too sure how to go. You don't know where to turn up. You don't know how to take those first steps. Take a step. Do anything. Do something. Because you know what? You're going to get it right eventually. Mm. You might get it right the first time. You might get it right the second time. You might take that first step. No one's going to criticize you or blame you or prevent you from having a go. Just do it.
So
just do something.
Yeah. So be brave enough to take a step.
Be brave enough to fail.
Be brave enough to fail. Okay. So I've done that. I'm brave enough to fail. I've taken that step. I'm having a little bit of success. What else should I be thinking about?
Okay. The people around you are probably almost as clueless as you are in what they're doing, but they're just faking it better. Most people I have found in life, we are all muddling through this together for the most part. No one really has all the answers. No one really knows what's going on. We kind of get it right and then hope for the best, or hope for the best and get it right. So, while there is a need for respect and to listen and to learn, your boss or your potential boss is not a deity. He is not a god. He does not have all the answers. And be aware of that. They are people with failings and flaws and all the rest of it. But at the same time, be the person that they want. Do what they need from you. Or, it's not about you as an individual. It's about you trying to find a path in this career and trying to find your own way. And the easiest way to get that path going in the early stages is to do what people want, is to be the person that people want. And it sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of people don't kind of get that.
So if I was to translate it into my world, it's deliver on expectations of the role.
Yeah, but you got to find out what that role is. Mm-hmm. You got to find out what they want, and then deliver on that. And I always like to over deliver and under promise. Okay. I think that will always serve you well.
Yeah. Okay. So show up, understand, and know what those expectations are, and remember, we're all just people trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and no one's got all the answers. God, maybe God does.
Yeah, it's so inconvenient to not have all the answers, right?
It really is. It's annoying.
Yeah, it is.
I think I have most of the answers.
I think we've talked about some of those data points that reinforces maybe that's not the case.
I love a good data point.
Good. So final thoughts for us as we wrap up. What are you thinking?
In general, I think, the world needs good leaders right now in so many ways, whether it's a corporate world, whether it's in our communities, at a national level. I think there is a real dearth of leadership. There's a real sort of void out there of people who are afraid to step up, afraid of failing, or I don't know, just don't want to, because it's a big, scary, horrible, uncertain time right now. And I guess there are more downsides to putting your hand up and taking a leadership role these days than there is upside. But I just think that we need more people who are willing, who I hope would have that sort of essence of public service within them to take that chance to try and lead us out of the mess that we're all in.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm often asked what I think about leadership right now, because it's clear leadership is hard. It is a hard time to be the boss. It's a hard time to be a leader in general. And if I find that discouraging or alarming or any of those things, and the answer is I actually find it really hopeful, because I think from my experience working with leaders in this horrible time, there's been an opportunity to introduce humanity back in leadership and the roles that the leader play. And that inspires the heck out of me and gives me hope, or at least I choose for it to give me hope. But it has been a really amazing thing to watch the last couple of years from the leaders that I work with.
Yeah. And there have been really some really good cases of corporate leaders who actually are people. Mm-hmm. And actually do have empathy and actually have shown real leadership and haven't been focused on the bottom line. I mean, I'm sure they are focused on the bottom line, but it's more long-term focused. Yeah. Rather than the short-term and quarterly results. Yeah. There's also, if you want to talk about turmoil and chaos and opportunity, I like movie references. Do you ever see The Replacements? Gene Hackman, Keanu Reeves.
Absolutely.
Remember what Gene Hackman said to Keanu Reeves? Winners want the ball.
Yeah.
You're lead, you want the ball. Winners want the ball.
Yep.
So that's what leadership's about.
Yeah, wanting the ball, taking it, being brave enough.
Take that chance.
Yeah. Good.
Winners want the ball.
Winners want the ball. I think we'll leave on that note. Winners want the ball. And I'm going to actually borrow that and steal it again, because I've forgotten that reference with my little teams that I coach of baseball and lacrosse. So I'm definitely using that probably this weekend. But I think, but I think it's a good one to leave us on, right? We talked about empathy, and we talked about being brave enough to listen, and we talked about making choices. But ultimately, leaders want the ball. They want to do the right thing. And they want to make it work for the people around them, for themselves, and the organizations that they serve. Yeah.
An opportunity, testing times, it's an opportunity. It's a challenge. It's for them to, for an individual to see what you got. You want to be a leader? Now's the time.
Well, this was so much fun.
Thank you.
I learned a huge amount from you. I enjoyed the conversation. I smiled, I laughed, and it was educational. And I'm positive that our listeners will find it equally as fascinating and educational. So thank you for spending the time with us. And thanks for coming on today.
It was my pleasure. I laughed, I cried, I laughed again.
So at least I left you on a laugh.
Absolutely. You always do.
What I'm left with is the reminder that the world needs good leaders. I think in John's words, he used phrases like, how can you carry the tripod? What's the role that you want to play? And that we're all just figuring it out. Thinking about the situation that you're in, thinking about the situation you want to be in, and thinking about how you lead, follow, or get out of the way is important to understand your role, what it means to the team, and how you do your best work. This is episode 12. Thanks for listening.